Hi there, welcome back to Mastering the Young Band. Today's episode is going to talk about beginner brass and their partials. For those of you that aren't brass players or are maybe new to the band world and teaching band, teaching your kids partials, being able to hear it, see it through their tuner, we'll talk about that in a second, and practicing it more than you might think is an essential step to your brass players, your beginner brass players succeeding in the first quarter and semester of beginning band. So brass partials, for those of you that don't know, that's a term brass players use for the different fingerings and positions. So for instance, in first position, no valves up, your beginning trumpets should be able to get the note G and C. G is their middle partial, C is their lower partial. After about 6 to 8 weeks, we do start working on the upper partial, but you want to be careful not to start that too early. You want to make sure that they have the middle and low partial with a great sound. What I've discovered with beginning band is you just get students that struggle to get the two partials. For trumpets, it's the G and C. For horns, it's G, E, and C. For your low brass, it's their F and B flat. I think too often we get impatient as beginner teachers and we just kind of move on and we don't do enough of the exercises and techniques that help the beginner student to really hear, see, and feel what to do to get those different partials. So here's the strategies I use for brass. So the first thing is we talk about their airflow. So when they're playing their middle partial, we talk about their air is blowing straight. We have their hand in front of them about 6 inches away. And we talk about when you're playing your middle partial, low brass F, horns and trumpets, they're G, that their air goes straight into their hand. And we just practice blowing into our hand. Then what we talk about is to go to the low partial, that their airstream needs to go up just a little bit. It's not much at all. It's like a quarter, at most half an inch, but really about a quarter inch. And it's almost more of a perception thing. And what we do is we practice blowing straight and then blowing up in the same motion. And we talk about what did our jaw do as we slowly aimed our air from straight to up. And they talk about, oh, my jaw opened up a little bit. Yeah, exactly. So we talk about that airflow going from their middle to their low partial, their air goes from straight to just a little bit higher. Notice I said a little bit higher. We don't want to go to the extreme like that because that's just not reasonable on a brass instrument. So we practice that airflow, we talk about it, then I demonstrate it to them and I say, hey, watch my jaw. I'm gonna go from middle to low partial. Watch what happens. And you can see I'm playing that like a siren where I'm going very, very slowly and feeling that change. And we practice that together. Then where I go, I play, you play. And we practice that slow change. That's what we call it. We call it a slow change from straight to low, middle to low partial. And we do that a ton. So my brass players, I do have my brass and woodwind separated. I use my beginning, my first warm-up page out of my Essential Foundations book. I don't even do numbers 1 through 8 all that much. I mainly do lines 9, 10, 11, and 12. That's where the brass players are going from their middle to their low partial a lot. You have to do that every day, every class period for pretty much the entire first quarter, 8 weeks of band. You just have to do it for a very long time. Do not skip that with your beginners. You just have to do a ton of this. Back. I'm not concerned about the drop to the notes yet. It's just that slow, gradual change so they can feel their embouchure, feel that air direction change, and feel how their jaw opens up a little bit. Another advantage of this for your beginners is when you do this slow change, you're going to get less beginners that do this. The blowout. Some of your beginners are gonna love to blow out their cheeks, especially kids that have braces. When you do this slow, gradual change, they really don't puff their cheeks as much. The kids that are puffing their cheeks, you just have to talk about the corner, stay firm. Think of opening your jaw and aiming your air higher to get the low note rather than your cheeks puffing out. Most kids can fix it. Once they're aware of it, give them a mirror and just tell them you're puffing. Here's what you need to do. Aim your air a little bit higher, change slower, and open your jaw to get the low partial instead of your cheeks puffing out. You have to do that a lot with your beginners. Once every kid, pretty much every kid in your beginner classes can do that change middle to low partial, then you go from the low to the middle partial. And you just talk about, okay, my airflow is gonna go a tiny bit higher to straight. My jaw is gonna go a little bit more open and then come up a little bit. And you do a lot of playing then from the low to the middle partial. Playing between that low and middle partial a lot in the beginning years is crucial to your students playing. You'll see in my Essential Foundations warm-ups, line 9 is all this. Does that 4 times. I play, they play. By the way, I do I play, you play on the first warm-up pretty much the entire time. Then it goes into an actual articulation. They play it back to me. Then we practice going from the low to the middle. And then line 12 is practice that over and over. Now, I have my students get the Korg tuners and pickup microphones. We talk about their tuner notes. So I actually have the kids get their pencils and write on their page for the first warm-up, line 9, their tuner notes. So for instance, the trumpets, the first note, they'll write TN, tuner note, equals F for the first note. And on the bottom note, they'll write TN equals B flat. For the horns, it's C and F. And then obviously for low brass, it's also F and B flat. Here's why that is an important thing for your beginners. You're gonna have kids that don't have very good musical ears, and they're gonna go home and always play in the low partial. We just did a playing assessment a week ago on the first 5 notes, set 2, where the kids do this. They go from G to F. In all of my brass classes, I had 2 to 3 brass players that were playing entirely on the low partial at home. They were doing this. They don't hear or feel yet that they're not on the middle partial. All of them that did it wrong didn't have their tuner out to reference their tuner notes. When I reminded them, have your tuner on, reminded them what's your tuner, they all went home and fixed it. It's a huge advantage to using those tuners for kids to see, brass players to see if they're on the right partial. We talk about that a lot in class. Before we play the first warm-up, I'll go, okay, horns, line 9 goes from your G to C. What's your tuner note for G? C, what's your tuner note for C? F, okay, watch for C and F. Trumpets, what's your tuner notes? F, what's the low partial? B flat, here we go. We'll play through a line. I'll go, how many of you saw the correct tuner notes the whole time? How many of you weren't on the right tuner notes and fixed it? That's a way of using tuners in kids' awareness. So we're not using tuners for tuning right now. We're really making it, especially for brass, on are you on the right partials? And it's an awesome tool for your beginners that don't hear or feel that middle partial yet. We're almost to the part, or to the step, I should say, with my beginners, where every one of them hears and feels now when they're on the low partial. When a kid plays something too low, I go, what happened? Oh, I was on the low partial. Okay, how do you fix it? Oh, I need to aim my air more middle, and I need to make sure my tuner note says C, for instance. Okay? So for your beginner brass players, so important that you spend a lot of time. Make it the first warm-up. That's why I call it that in the book. You have to play that first warm-up for a very long time until your kids really, truly understand what that middle and low partial feel like. Once they get to that, then you can move on to the first warm-up, step 2, which introduces the upper partial. And so for the upper partial, we talk about the airflow. Instead of going up a little bit higher, it goes a little bit lower to get that upper partial. And again, we do that a ton. We go between the middle and upper partial, but they have to be strong enough, and you have to make sure that they don't suck in the bottom lip and do strange things to their embouchure when they start doing that upper partial. So I hope that helps you. That's how I use that first warm-up. It's such an important warm-up for your brass players to get them on that middle and low partial. Thank you.